time. Karen, thank you so much for making time. So, a postponement once again. This is 3 years and almost R1 billion later, and this is the fourth postponement, right?
Absolutely. I mean, there have been 4 extensions already granted. This will be the 4th extension that is being sought in the Pretoria High Court by the state capture inquiry. Remember when Thuli Madonsela first recommended that there be a state capture inquiry into these allegations against, amongst other people, former President Jacob Zuma and the Guptas, she said that it should take 6 months. It's now taken like 5 times that amount. And as you said, close to R1 billion, the most expensive inquiry in South African history.
So why has the Commission failed to conclude its work since the last postponement that was granted, Karen? I heard the Deputy Chief Justice indicating today that he doesn't want to conclude the inquiry irresponsibly. What have been the challenges?
Well, I think the major issue has been, and he will have to explain this when he files an affidavit at the High Court. When he last applied for an extension, he said that the period up until March this year would be spent on, oral hearings, concluding the evidence. Instead, the 3 months that was meant to be spent on writing the report was consumed by evidence. In the hearing today, he was articulating what some of that evidence was, why he felt it was important. But the question still remains, when is the inquiry actually going to finish hearing evidence? He's now saying that the President Cyril Ramaphosa will be the last witness, but before that happens, there are 5 or 6 unknown witnesses, we don't know who they are, we can just speculate at this point, who need to give testimony. And of course, the court this matter, as far as we know, is not opposed, but the court may well ask some questions about what guarantees that we have that this endless cycle of oral evidence is actually going to come to an end. DCJ Zondo assuring the court that it would, but as you rightly point out, these extensions have been granted in the past, and at least in respect of the last one, the DCJ did not live up to his assurances to the court that the evidence would be finished by March.
And the problem with these extensions is that they, in the past, have cost taxpayers more money. With this particular extension, is he going to need more funding?
Well, given that, we know that another 5 or 6 witnesses will have to come in and testify, that will obviously cost logistical amounts. Investigators will be required. We don't know who these witnesses are who are going to testify, but some of the names that we haven't heard from, for example, the former head of the State Security Agency, Arthur Fraser, is of course a big name. Ace Magashule at one point said he would come and give evidence, and still major question marks over if the Constitutional Court orders the former President Jacob Zuma to serve a suspended sentence if he comes. Whether Zuma may be, may ultimately be called to account before the inquiry. So, we don't know who these witnesses are. We don't know at this point what evidence they're giving, and we don't know how long that evidence will take. If these are big, heavy hitter witnesses whose testimonies are required in order to give some sense of balance and response to some of the very serious allegations made here, it may take more than 5 or 6 days to hear that testimony. Yeah,
look, I'm not putting my money on the former president possibly coming to the commission, but hey, you never know. So if he does need more money with this extension, Karen, what are the chances that Treasury will make that money available? I remember the finance minister indicating earlier this year that Treasury was actually reluctant to funding the commission. He said the commission needs to conclude its work. But then again, you've got the High Court ruling in 2017 that said the president must ensure that Treasury, in fact, allocates adequate resources for this inquiry. I'm sure they didn't know at the time that 3 years later we would be sitting with a situation where we still talk about postponements.
I mean, the reality is that, the state capture inquiry has provided a lot of evidence which have been utilized by the state to, for example, seize and forfeit assets or to, compel certain of the companies who've been involved in so-called state capture corruption to pay back the money. And that has been a previous defense raised by Zondo against the criticism of the intense levels of finance that have been required for this inquiry. We know that, there was a huge issue for 7 months with investigators not being paid, many of whom were providing evidence to the NPA for state capture prosecutions, including the long-awaited Estina Dairy Farm scam case. That's been held in abeyance. And I mean, a key question, of course, the state capture inquiry had indicated that it would provide evidence verifying the veracity of the Gupta leaks so that they could be used in criminal prosecutions. That hasn't happened yet, but if it does, it would be a profoundly valuable aspect to this inquiry and what it's been able to do. But I think one of the most heartbreaking aspects for me is that the low-paid staff at the inquiry, the transcribers, the guys who are putting the broadcast together for since September last year, have been working insane hours, sometimes between 8 and midnight every day, and they still have not been paid a cent in overtime. So while investigators were paid, and a lot of the advocates and the legal representatives did get that money, the people who are working the hardest at the coldface of this commission still have no guarantee that they're actually going to get paid for those additional hours. And the department keeps saying the matter's been resolved, but Clement, as yet it hasn't been.
Yeah, Karen Mon, I really appreciate your time on the lead this afternoon. Karen Mon is a senior legal journalist with News 24. Remember, Malusi Gigaba, the former minister, will be back at the state capture inquiry this afternoon.